Amen. All right. So let's go ahead and get started tonight, guys. We're going to pick up into our series on increasing our faith. And as we go into increasing our faith, we are actually down into the last two in Hebrews chapter 11. We are down into the last two, going near to the very, very end. And in this one here, we're actually talking about something a little different. It's actually about a situation that happened. It's an event that occurred, not specifically about a person. There is a person applied to this that we're going to learn from, but rather it's actually in Hebrews 11 talks about an event that occurred in biblical history. So we're going to go into Hebrews chapter 11, verse 30. We're going to read from one verse. And after we get through that one verse, we're going to dive into actually Joshua chapter 6. But I want us to start tonight in Hebrews chapter 11, beginning with verse number 30 and only verse number 30. It says here, "By faith the walls of Jericho fell down after they were compassed about 7 days." That verse right there is going to give us everything we need to know for tonight, and is going to give us exactly where we need to go. We're going to move into the book of Joshua, and I want to read this part actually really quick before we talk about what we're going to go over. A little brief summary. I want to go into the book of Joshua, and I want to go into the number 5, Joshua 5. We're going to start on verse 13 and go all the way down to verse 15. I want to start with this part really quick as it's going to introduce us into what's happening here. In my Bible, it's labeled here in Joshua 5:13, the fall of Jericho. "And it came to pass when Joshua was by Jericho that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there stood a man over against him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went unto him and said unto him, Art thou for us or for our adversaries? And he said, Nay, but as captain of the host of the Lord am I now come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and did worship, and said unto him, What saith my Lord unto his servant? And the captain of the Lord's host said unto Joshua, Loose thy shoe from off thy foot, for the place whereon thou standest is holy. And Joshua did so." A little introduction as to what we're going to talk about tonight, the fall of Jericho. And our topic for tonight, our title for tonight is labeled Faith to Conquer Our Obstacles. So last week we talked about faith to be a leader. Now we're going to talk about somebody who showed a good representation of what it means to be a leader and what it means to face our obstacles, and can we conquer obstacles in our lives. So as we read about this section really quick in Joshua chapter 5, we read that Joshua met a person afar off who he went to go see. He was by Jericho, and when he went to go talk with this person, he asked him, are you for us or are you against us? Are you somebody who's going to help us, or are you somebody who is gonna help our enemies? Are you a friend or enemy? And that person had told him, you know exactly who I am. I am the Lord your God. I am, and basically what he's saying in that part of Joshua chapter 5, if I go back there really quick, at the very end, at the very bottom, he says, nay, but as a captain of the host of the Lord am I now come. Right there, he's basically saying that he is Jesus Christ himself who has come to help them in this moment. At that point in time, he fell down and worshiped him. Now, if he worshiped an angel at that point in time, angels would have immediately told him, stand up, you don't worship me, you worship God and God alone. But this being let him stay there on the floor, and he asked him, what is it that you command me of? And he tells him, take off your shoes, because where you're standing is a holy ground, is holy ground. Right there, he's seeing Jesus Christ come in as a commander at this point. And Jesus is going to tell him exactly what he needs to do to take down the walls of Jericho, to take down the city of Jericho. Jericho was a city that they were going through, that Israel had just passed the sea. They were going into Jericho, and they had to get through. In order to get through Jericho, they had to take down Jericho. In order for them to conquer Jericho, they had to take down their walls first. All right, and so when Joshua was left with this task here, he knew that the history behind Jericho was they weren't a giant city, but they were a strong city. They weren't a big place, but they had walls, that they had a defense that was unlike anyone else, that was not matched like anyone else. He knew it was going to be a tough job, and this is where Christ tells him, don't worry, I'm going to help you out here conquer this place. I'm going to help you conquer Jericho. And so for the lesson that we're going to go over tonight, I want us to see, do we have faith to conquer obstacles in our lives? Do we have faith to conquer these things that come into our lives? Do we have the ability to say, I want to be able to take this down, something that's coming into my life that's just stopping me from being able to move on to something else that's in my way? It's standing there right in front of me. It's just causing some type of weight on my life. Can I remove that from my life? Do I have faith to do that? Because Joshua is known as somebody here who's a great leader. Joshua was known as somebody, I'm not just talking about Joshua right here, who is a great leader. I'm talking about Joshua in the Bible. Joshua sitting over here like, yes, you know. He's like, don't need to praise me more. But we're talking about Joshua here in the Bible being known as a great leader, somebody who is a great man of God. And now he's going to hear instructions from Christ. He's going to hear instructions being told. And I think we can take those instructions that he was given. We can take the situation from Jericho, and we can understand how can we apply this to our lives, and understand, do we have that ability to conquer the walls of Jericho in our lives? So the first thing I want us to look at as we look into conquer our obstacles is point number one. The obstacles we face are already conquered for us. The obstacles that we face in life, they've already been conquered for us. So before we even begin to talk about the obstacles that we have in our lives and the trials and the temptations and the problems that we go through, I want us to kind of set something really clear from the very beginning. Before it's even over, it's already been done with. Before we've even finished, this is it. It's done with. Christ says it so. How? In the book of Joshua, chapter 6, he tells them here in verse 1, now Jericho was straitly shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out and none came in. Right then and there, it has been described to us that no one can go in and no one can come out of Jericho. It is that strong. In verse number 2, it says, and the Lord said unto Joshua, see, I have given into thy hand Jericho and the king of thereof and the mighty men of valor. At that point right there, he tells him, I want you to see that I have already given Jericho to you. So as he's talking to Joshua in this moment, as he's meeting with him, as soon as he tells Joshua to take off his shoes, you're standing on holy ground, he tells Joshua, the first thing I want to establish with you, Jericho is already yours. I've already declared it. I've already made it. I've already said it. It's already been put into my word. Jericho is as good as defeated. He says, it's done. So I think the first thing we want to realize for tonight is before we even start to panic about our obstacles, before we start to panic about the trials that we go through, and before we start to think about, okay, the things that I'm going to have to go through at some point, realize the fact that when you're a Christian, when you're somebody who's ready to stand up for God, when you're somebody in the faith, God is trying to tell us at times, don't worry, I've already claimed it to be the thing that you're going to take down. I've already claimed it to be done with. Don't you worry about it. Don't you stress about it. I want us to see that in the John chapter 16, verse 33, and I quote this one a lot because I really, really take this verse to heart. I really love this verse so much, and I love to quote it all the time, and I want to get it correct right here with you all. In John chapter 16, verse 33, at the very bottom, he says, "These things I have spoken unto you, that in me ye might have peace. In the world ye shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer, I have overcome the world." I love quoting that verse in everything that we talk about here. And I think it comes up a lot. And I think it's no mystery that we talk about this a lot so much in faith, because Christ is trying to tell us, don't worry, I have overcome this world. So the things that you have to suffer through, the things that you're having to go through, the problems that we're having, whether it's with our health, physically or mentally or emotionally or whatever we're having to conquer in our lives, or maybe the issues that we find at work or the issues we find at school or the worry that we sometimes go through. I think Christ tells us that you'll have that tribulation here. I'm not saying you're not going to have it. He says you will. But guess what? I've already taken care of those things because they're already done. I've already checked them off. I've already been able to take care of that. It's like somebody who, when you come into a new job and you're looking at somebody trying to tell them, I have no idea how to do this. And somebody says, I've been doing this for 35 years. Don't you worry about it. I'm going to help you out. That gives you so much reassurance right there, because you know somebody who knows exactly what the job is and how it needs to be taken care of and how to, do the day in and day out operations. Gives you so much more peace when you know somebody's there to help you every step of the way. Christ is that type of rock for us. And I want us to know that about our obstacles. When Joshua went to go talk with them, I'm sure Joshua was thinking at this point in time, I don't know how we're going to do this. I don't know how this is going to happen. I know that that's a mighty fortress. I know that the walls of Jericho are known to be super strong. They're known to be almost impenetrable. I know that they're known to be the best, right now within the country. And I don't know how we're going to do this. And then only for him to be told by Christ at that moment, I've already given you Jericho. I can imagine how much relief had come to him at that point for him to see God and think, thank you. So at this point now, all I got to do is trust you. And sometimes I think as Christians, we miss that just a little bit. Sometimes I think we get so caught up in this, well, yes, I trust you. And yes, I know that you've overcome this world, but I'm still going to panic about it. I'm still going to stress about these things that are stuck in my path. When we should have a sense of relief, when we should have a sense of, well, thank the Lord that he has already conquered this issue I'm going through. So now I can just trust him to work through me in this. Now I can just trust him to get me through this. Now I don't got to think whether or not I'm going to get through this. No, I've already gone through this. He's already declared it. He's already said so. And I'm going to be able to move through this. I just need to trust God every single step of the way. I want us to sometimes realize, and in the most basic way, kind of moving off the topic a little bit, but God doesn't ever intend to bring harm into our lives. When we're his children, God never intends to bring us harm. Never. He leads us down the path of righteousness. He leads us beside the still waters. He takes us into those moments where, to greener pastures. He wants us to have that type of comfort in our lives. So my point for it is, I guess my sub point for this one is, stop stressing about your obstacles. It's already been taken care of. Stop stressing about the things that we're going through in life. It's already been taken care of. Yeah, we can have some worries at times, and it's good for us to have a certain level of stress. It's what gets us up in the morning. It's what pushes us to go to work. It's what pushes us to get an A in our classes. It's what pushes us to find friends. It's what pushes us to be, good people in the society. We want to be able to make a difference in this world, and we want to be able to make an impact on certain people, and we want to be a blessing to others. So there's a good level of stress, but then there's an over amount of stress that we don't need to go through, where it starts to stop us from being able to get closer to God, and it moves us away from him. See, Joshua could have at this moment told Christ, well, okay, yeah, you're saying it's declared into me, but I don't know how you're going to do it. So while you figure that out, I'm going to go wait with my people and kind of figure out a plan of our own. So you can tell me what you're going to do, and I'm going to go wait over here and stress with my people here. And no, he didn't do that. He got closer to him, and he said, perfect, awesome. You're declaring this now. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to do this. All right? We need to stop trying to rewrite history that hasn't even happened. We need to stop trying to rewrite history when history hasn't even happened for us. We're trying to go and we're trying to control things that are happening in our lives. We're trying to go out there and try to figure things out and trying to push ourselves to a certain limit where we just start losing, grasp of reality at times. And, the more we struggle, the harder it is to get a hold of it. When Christ is already telling us, what are you trying to grab a hold of? I already have it here. Like I'm holding it right here. Like you're digging through your backpack for something. You're going through a bag and you're trying to find it. You're just trying to get a hold of it. And you're looking only in the background to see somebody just holding it. Like, is this what you're looking for? And then you have this sense of relief. It just hits you. And you're like, if you had just said something while I was going through this and panicking, sometimes we feel like that. We're trying to tell you something like, I have it right here. Why are you panicking? I think the Lord sometimes does that for us. He sees us panicking in the corner trying to find something. And he says, if you just turn around and look for a second, I have it right here. I'm holding it right here. He wants us to know that before we start to freak out, before we start to have this sense of panic, it's already been taken care of for us. The first point I want to make tonight is, if we don't get anything else, is don't worry about the problems that we have at times, because he doesn't want us to have that worry. He doesn't want us to have that panic. He wants us to know he's already taken care of it for us. That should bring us a little sense of relief. That should bring us a whole lot of sense of relief. Should give us a spirit of, Lord, you take care of me so much. Even the things that you've seen me, that I'm going to go through later on, you've already conquered those for me. So I want us to know, if we're going to tackle our obstacles in life, if we're going to be able to face them, first realize that these are things that God has not seen, doesn't catch God off guard. It's things he's already taken care of. He's already conquered those obstacles for us. My second point for tonight, the obstacles we face, they aren't big, they're just tough. So I think sometimes we get this, we're not clear on this a lot as a society, as people. We kind of get caught up in the idea that our problems are huge, our problems are big. I know people, I talk to people at work that do have some pretty big issues, that have some pretty big problems. And I want to pray for those people whenever I get that opportunity to. Because I want to pray for my coworkers, and I want to pray for my friends, and I want to pray for people that I know are going through a whole lot, more than what I'm going through for sure. And I want to be able to tell them, I'm going to pray for you. I'm going to lift up a prayer for you. Don't you worry. But I want us to realize that sometimes we use that word a lot. Our problems are big. The obstacles that we face are huge. I don't think they're ever huge. I think they're just tough. And I want to give this reason why. It says that in verse 1, it says that Jericho was completely closed to the outside, that no one could go in, but no one could come out. But the Bible doesn't say that Jericho was a huge fortress. The Bible doesn't say that Jericho stretched across the land so far that when you look to the left and you look to the right, or if you look to the east and the west, you could not see the end to Jericho. It doesn't say that when they had the people of Israel marching around Jericho, that it took them years to get around Jericho, that it would take them months to circle around Jericho. They would do it within days. The Lord had asked them to move around days. And we're going to get to that point right now really quick. But I just want us to know the fact that when you've heard the story about Jericho, when you've heard them marching, the Israelites marching around it, it wasn't a huge place. It wasn't a huge city. It was just a strong city. It was a small place. It was only 7 acres wide, which is in relation to about 7 football fields wide, which is only so many 700 some yards long, more or less. It wasn't a huge place. It wasn't a ginormous fortress. So when you're looking at Jericho, when God is trying to give them a view of Jericho, he's trying to tell them, don't worry, it's not huge, it's just one tough place. Sometimes our problems are like that in life. We sometimes view our problems as being huge. There's no end to it. There's no end to our problems. There's no end to the obstacles we face. But there is an end to the obstacle we face. There is an end to the obstacles that we go through in life. I've gone through it before when I go through one problem after another, only to realize, hey, wait a minute, that happened several months ago. Wow, that's in the past. And several months ago, I thought this was never going to end for me. I thought this was never going to go away. I thought this problem would always stay. I thought this problem would always just be in my life forever, only to realize that happened years ago. That happened, in 2019. That happened, as I always date things back to like either pre-pandemic or after the pandemic. That's how I date things now from 2020, from before. So if I say 2019, I'm always telling people pre-pandemic. And then I realize how long ago that was. We thought the pandemic was going to stay with us forever. We thought we'd never get out of having to stay indoors. We thought we never had to get over having to wear masks all the time and having to worry about if the person next to you that was 6 feet away from you was feeling sick or not feeling sick. And if they coughed, you kind of panicked and were like, whoa, like I kind of need to move away from that person. Just a simple cough would throw people off. And we thought that thing was going to stay with us forever, only to realize right now where we at in our lives. How good has God been to us, and the fact that he's been able to move us away from that situation, that we're not stuck in a place where we can't go out anymore, where we're stuck in a place where we have to worry about how sick someone is, where we have medication now to be able to take care of that. We have the ability to go to the doctor and actually have them say, okay, you know what, don't worry, we're going to help you through this. It's not something where they're like, oh, wow, we're still in that moment 5 years later, 4 years later. Look at the obstacles that we face and things like that as a society. They're moved away from us already. They still have lingering effects, but we're nowhere near what we were dealing with before, where we were stuck inside the middle of our house thinking, how long is this going to last for? Now look at where we're at. I want us to just get this visual of our problems are not big. They're just tough. They're just hard problems sometimes. I'm not going to say that we have easy problems to go through. No. But I do want to say that we don't have big problems where they're never ending. And sometimes we have that attitude as Christians that we kind of get to this thing of there's no hope for us in the end. There's no hope for us with this problem. There's no hope for us to get through this. There's no hope for us to find an end to this. We feel like Jericho was this huge place that they looked, east and west, and they thought, I can't find the end of this wall. That wall just keeps going and going. But no, there was an end to it. The only problem with Jericho was it was a tough facility to get into. It was a tough city to break down. And I want us to see that about our problems. Our problems are tough, but guess what? I think we're tough Christians. I think we're made to be tough Christians. I think the Lord has given us the spirit of toughness. The Lord has given us the spirit of being able to fight, a spirit of being able to say, no, I won't fall down to the problems in my life. I'll be able to stand up to them because God's word says I can do that. God's word says I'm able to have that type of spirit. And I want us to kind of see these two things really quick before we move on to the third point. I want us to know that, our trials can be hard, but we have hope. I want us to know that, you have the ability to fight tough problems. We have the ability to be able to take on tough obstacles. And my first point with that is don't make your problems bigger than they are. The first thing that we want to realize is if we don't have big problems, don't make them big. If we don't have big problems, if they're just tough, guess what? Don't make them big. Don't make them bigger than what they already are. I mean, sometimes we get into the habit of making problems bigger than what they are. And that can lead to so many more problems. That leads to so many things that happen to us. We go through certain periods of stress and anxiety and depression, and we start to lose our hunger. And the next thing you know, we're not building a healthy lifestyle. And then, we're stuck in our rooms at times just day in and day out, not wanting to leave the room, not wanting to be social with other people. And then, it just leads to one problem, to the other, because I've seen this happen before to some people in my life. And I'm thinking all because they started with one thing and they made it bigger than what it already was. I knew that problem was tough for them, but I didn't think it was big. They made it big. We make them big. Our problems can be tough, but they don't have to be big. We don't have to lose hope. There's a difference between being big and being tough. I've known many people that we've coached before, that Christy and I have coached before, that when we see them come in, there was this one player that I'm thinking about that plays at the school that we were coaching at, and he was a big person. He's a tall person. He's really strong. He looks really strong, and he comes off a little bit, I'm thinking of several people, actually, that continue this picture. And then when we see them play basketball, we have this one coach that was coaching them for the longest time. We were watching the game one day, and this player is trying to play, and he's about 6 foot. The biggest one that I've seen is about 6'3", 6'4", big guys, but only to be pushed around by people smaller than me. And on the court, I can hear the coaches screaming at him. And he's like, this is the biggest guy you can see on the court. And he's being pushed around. And he's like, look at this. He goes, that's the size of the guy. And people automatically see that guy, and they're like, that's a huge guy. Don't mess with him. And as soon as the other team gets on the court and they can push him around, you can hear the other coach going, no, take him, play him. Because guess what? They lost the fear of something that big. They lost the fear of someone who they were like, that person's not playing as big as they are. They're not playing tough. They're not playing big. I think sometimes we have to realize that we can face our problems like that. They look big at first, but only to realize, no, they're not that tough. We want to be able to say that we can take those problems down. They may appear big, but guess what? They're not. We can make them bigger. Whether we want to or not, sometimes it's out of fault. We just make them bigger than what they already are. My second point, tough obstacles require obedient spirits. So tough obstacles that we go through in life, these things that are not big, they're tough, not big, but tough, they require an obedient spirit. In Joshua chapter 6, it says here in 6, let me move over actually really quick. So in Joshua 6, verses 6 and 7, and I'm trying to get it to load here. It says here, and Joshua the son of Nun called the priests and said unto them, take the ark of the covenant, and let 7 priests bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord. And he said unto the people, pass on and compass the city, and let him that is armed pass on the ark before the Lord. And it says a little further down, it says in verse number 12, and Joshua rose early in the morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord. And 7 priests bearing 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord went on continually and blew with the trumpets, and the armed men went before them. But the reward came after the ark of the Lord, the priests going on and blowing with trumpets. In this part right here, it's just saying the fact that as soon as God commanded the people of Israel, he said, Joshua, what you're going to do is you're going to take these people, you're going to take those priests, you're going to take your soldiers, you're going to have them march around Israel for 6 days silent. And then on the 7th day, when I tell you, you can let out the shout, they will shout and the walls will fall down. While you are doing this right here, you're just going to have them carry around the ark with them, the ark of the covenant. You're going to carry the ark of God with you everywhere you go throughout that traveling. And Joshua did not stop and go, hold on, Lord, hold on, wait. I don't get what you're trying to say. You're going to march? We're going to march? What he did was as soon as he heard the command from God, he turned around and he went, let me go tell the priest, let me go tell the soldiers, let me go tell them exactly what the game plan is. So if God said you're going to carry this to 7 rams, the whole thing that he quoted verbatim, he gave it to them exactly the way he needed to give it to them. He told them exactly the way God commanded it. He didn't skip any corners and go, yeah, he said something about you going this way and this person going this way, and I think we're supposed to kind of go around in a circle or something, and the city's kind of squarish, but we're going to kind of figure this out. No, he told them exactly what they needed to do. So this tough problem that he was facing required a very obedient spirit from Joshua. The same thing goes for us in our lives. When we face tough problems, we need to be an obedient Christian. Because God might be trying to give us an answer to our problem only for us to get into I don't know if I should do this or not. This does not sound, normal to me, Lord. I don't know if you have a handle on this one or not, so I'm going to probably have to jump in and take care of this myself. Since it's my life, I can take care of exactly what I need to because I know myself. I don't know if we ever get into that mentality, but I know sometimes I do, only to find myself realizing that the only person who knows me better than myself is God himself. The creator of all humanity knows each and every one of us and exactly how we function. And he knew exactly how Joshua needed to take on this problem. And he gave him exactly the commandment that he needed. And Joshua followed it with an obedient spirit. He had that faith to say, you told me I can already conquer this. You told me it was already given to me. I'm going to hear exactly what you need to tell me. Because this is one tough problem, but you're one tough God. And exactly what you tell me, I will relate to them. And he told them. And the people had the faith to be able to listen to Joshua. Joshua demonstrated this type of faith, and the people believed it, and the people saw it, and the people were like, yes, exactly, we'll do what he says because he's such a faithful Christian, because he's so faithful to God, and we can see exactly who he is, much a fearless leader. We're going to follow exactly what he tells us to do. Everyone here in this situation had an obedient spirit. And I just want us to think how much better would our lives be if we just had that in every single problem we faced, if we had such an obedient spirit to God. Point number 3. So going back to it really quick, obstacles we face, they've already been conquered for us. The obstacles we face, they're not that big, they're just tough. And thirdly, the obstacles we face, they may require some strange solutions. So I want us to really think about the fact that God had told Joshua, you're going to have them march around the city for 7 days. On the 7th day, you'll be able to let out a big shout. But for the 6 days, you're going to be marching in silence. Joshua was known to be a very big military commander. He was a very, very smart military person. So to him right here, I think in his experience, in the things that he went through, in the lifestyle that he was living, for the years that he was a commander, for the years that he knew exactly how to lead an army, this did not make any sense to him. This had no military strategy to it. You see, you could probably dig under the ground, you could dig under the wall and find a way to get underneath it, or you could try to find a way to jump over the wall and try to sneak over them like that, or you could try to find a way that there's a defense, there's a weakness in the wall somewhere, and you could march around, and he'd probably think, okay, good, I can march around the wall, we can find a weak spot, whether it's under the ground, over, or through the wall. But God had told them, all you're going to do is march around the wall. And Joshua knew that this had no military strategy at all whatsoever. There's no person who's ever written a military strategy based on just marching around like this. There's intimidation towards that, but no way of being able to tell, and you're going to win a victory because you marched. But guess what? Joshua had the faith and obedience to say, I'm going to let that happen more than exactly what I already know. The next point I want to make, faith and obedience beat knowledge and experience every single time. I promise you that, because guess what? I go through my life thinking that I know it all sometimes, exactly when I tell people at work, oh, this situation here requires this, and I don't know why they're doing this, and I don't know why they're doing that, and I don't know why we're having to go through this. They should just change it like this and change it like that, and we should do this. And then I have to realize sometimes maybe that's not the right way to work through it. Because sometimes God may be leading us through an obstacle and he'll tell us to do something completely different, something strange, a solution that we're like, that is totally out of whack. But guess what? God doesn't want us to think in this way of like, it has to make sense. We just have to trust him. We just have to trust everything he's going to tell us. Faith and obedience will beat knowledge and experience every single time. Because I guarantee you, the older we get, the more we get into, our jobs, or the more we get into the education system, and the more we go into school, the more we're taught, the more we know, the more we learn. But that doesn't beat faith and obedience with God. See, Joshua knew all these different things, and he didn't ask Joshua, what is your military experience in this? Let me figure out what you know. Let me ask you what you would do. No, he tells him, I'm going to give you some type of crazy solution to this. And Joshua said, I'm going to put my faith and obedience in that. I know a military strategy that may or may not be able to get us through this. I may need some time to sit down with my men and soldiers and kind of devise a plan, but he says, no, I'm going to go exactly with what God had said. Faith and obedience will always beat knowledge and experience every single time. Fourthly, the obstacles we face require patience and silence. See, Israel was told to march around the wall in silence every single day for 6 days, and on the 7th day, they could let out that shout. See, I think sometimes we have to let God do the talking and we just do the listening. I think sometimes we have to be silent for a moment to hear God. Because sometimes we can get into a shouting match with God. Sometimes we can get into this yelling match with God. The show that Christy and I like to watch, The Chosen, there was an episode one time where Peter was being frustrated because he couldn't catch any fish. And it was a scene right before in the Bible where they say that he tells him to throw it on the other side. And when he pulls out, he's able to pull out all that fish. And before that moment happened, Peter's just having this shouting match with God, just screaming and shouting and kind of like, almost in a way cursing out God, just telling him, I don't know why I'm going through this, and this is ridiculous. And you told me you're my God, but I can't believe you right now at this moment. Sometimes we get into these shouting matches with God, and we start to get impatient, and we start to just see he's not doing anything, only to realize we don't have a spirit of patience, and we're being louder than God is in our lives. My next point here, patience and silence can bring us a loud answer from God. So if we sit in the silence, if we sit in calmness, if we can sit patiently and quietly and just let God speak for a moment, we can hear the answer that he has for us in our lives. I think if we want to be able to tackle the obstacles in our life, if we're asking God to bring us that answer, let him speak to us. Let him speak to you. When you're trying to get an answer out of somebody, and I've been in this conversation before with different people, when you're trying to talk with them and you're trying to get something, you're trying to have this conversation with somebody and they're asking you something, so you start to talk and then they start to cut you off. And they start to have this just one-way conversation, and you're trying to get, you're trying to make your point, you're trying to say something, but they just keep interrupting you and they just keep throwing these things at you. And finally for them at the end, they're kind of like, so yeah, what do you think? And you're like, if you just let me speak 5 minutes ago, I would have given you exactly what you needed to know 5 minutes ago. Sometimes we get like that with God. We start to tell God to give us his answer. We start to ask him for patience. We start to ask him for clarity. We start to ask him to take care of these things in our lives. We start to ask him to remove certain things that are happening to us. And we start going on this rambling mode, and we just start talking and talking. And it's one thing to pray to God, but it's another thing to just start having this match with him where you just keep going on and just telling him, talk to me, talk to me, talk to me, talk to me, talk to me. And you start going at it with him, and God's trying to say, hold on. Let me speak to you. Have you gone into prayer? Have you gone into some silent mode? Have you gone into fasting? I know this is something I haven't touched on before, and I want to do a topic on this one day, but I know my wife and I have participated in that fasting before. A while back, a couple of months ago, we were told, hey, have you fasted? Have you done this? And we found that challenge, and we took a part in that challenge, and we found ourselves being what? Put down on our knees and being told you need to rely on God in that exact moment. And you feel very silent at that time. You feel very weak at that time sometimes because you're like, I want this and I can't have this because I'm relying on you. I found patience in that moment. I found myself being silent for just a moment just to hear God talking to me and telling me, it's going to be okay. I'm going to help you with this. I'm going to take care of this for you. Those moments that we find patience and we find silence, and we're going to hear from God. Last thing before we close out, the obstacles we face, they can end in praise. In Joshua chapter 6, verse 20, if we go there, the last verse that we're looking at, it says here, so the people shouted when the priest blew with the trumpets, and it came to pass when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people shouted with a great shout, that the wall fell down flat, so that the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they took the city. At that point in time, it wasn't just God declaring them, trying to tell them, okay, they weren't just following a commandment from God, and he told them, shout. When I tell you it's time to shout, when I tell Joshua to tell you it's time to go and let out this big shout, do it. It wasn't just them acting in obedience, but this was a declaration that they already knew God's promises being fulfilled. Sometimes we need to have that at the end of our obstacles, at the end of the things that we face. We get real silent at times with our praises. We start to get with God really close and we start to move this. And then when God removes that obstacle in our lives, we get really silent with God and we go, okay, thanks, good thumbs up. Let me continue on with my life because I need to do this. That obstacle you removed, thanks God, I still got more to do. But in this moment in time, just right before that wall fell down, they let out a big shout. They let out a big praise because this was a declaration to God saying that he is good, he is great, and he is ready to take on anything that they ask of. It wasn't just an act of obedience in God's commandment. It was a declaration to God saying, you have conquered this already. We know exactly what's going to happen. See, the wall did not fall and they started to shout and think, wow, this actually worked. It was the other way. It was them shouting and praising God for what he's done that the walls were able to fall, that the walls were able to be knocked down. And then they were able to say, God is great because he's already conquered this for us even when we don't know this. And I think we need to have an attitude like that in our lives at times when it comes to our obstacles. Give praise during the times when it gets hard. Give praise during the times when it gets really tough. Give praise to God even when you know it's really difficult. Last verse, Daniel chapter 3, verse 17 and 18. This is one of my favorite verses as well in the Bible. Daniel chapter 3, verse 17 and 18. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thy hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. I love those two verses so much because they go hand in hand so well in us learning the fact that they were able to stand up and say, we're not going to worship any God that you have set for us or any graven image. God is able to rescue us in this moment. And even if he doesn't, we will not bow down to you. We know that it'd be God's will for whatever happens in our lives. And they gave praise to God in that moment. In that moment, they're declaring that God is great no matter what happens in our lives. And so I just want to challenge us tonight as we begin to close. I want us to really find praise and peace in our obstacles that we go through in our lives. That we can have some type of peace, we can have some type of praise to know the fact that even when things are tough, that we can still see God is great. If we want to have faith to tackle obstacles, we need to realize God is already taking care of them for us. We need to realize they're not big, they're just really tough. And we need to have a spirit of obedience during that time. I want us to realize that sometimes we need to have patience and sit in the silence to hear God. I want us to realize that if we want to take down these obstacles, sometimes it requires some strange solutions because we don't rely on our knowledge, we rely on faith to God. And I want us to realize that even through it all, as you go through life facing obstacles, you have that ability to praise him every step of the way before those obstacles fall down, before those obstacles are brought down. So maybe some of us are going through that tonight. Maybe some of us are facing certain obstacles in our lives. Maybe some of us are facing like the walls of Jericho in our own lives. I want us to find that faith tonight. I want us to be able to find that faith to be able to say, Lord, you're greater than those things in my life. Help me to be able to conquer those obstacles in my life like you have already done for me. Let's go ahead and pray. Heavenly Father, we want to thank you again for this Wednesday night, dear Lord. I just want to thank you for the book of Joshua, dear Lord. I want to thank you for hearing this in Hebrews 11, that by faith the walls of Jericho were able to fall, Lord. And by faith, Lord, we can have the same spirit to say, I want to be able to tackle on these things in my life. Whoever may be going through something tough or whatever obstacle we may come through in our life very soon, dear Lord, or in the near future, at any point in our lives, that we can have the faith to trust in you. We can have patience. We can have sit in the silence to hear you. That we can trust you every step of the way to bring us out of those obstacles, to bring us out of those trials that we go through. And so, Lord, please, we ask that you can increase our faith in this time, dear Lord, faith to be able to conquer obstacles in our lives. We love you, dear Lord, and we thank you for all these things. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.